Well, it's official. The ACC has officially settled with Florida State and Clemson, and it appears that we now have more details as far as what the actual exit fee is going to be for teams to leave the league before 2030 and after 2030. How secure is the ACC really? And from a Big 12 perspective, what does this mean for the conference that I cheer for? The team I cheer for is in the Big 12. Is it good for the Big 12? Or could it actually hurt the Big 12 down the line? We're going to talk about all that in this live edition of Couz's Corner. Thank you all for joining the show, and I'm sorry I'm a little bit late. I do want to give a quick shout out to my channel sponsors, Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Bugner, and new sponsor, Appalachia Digital. Right now, I want to give a quick shout out. Before we get into the content, I want to give a quick shout out to one of those sponsors, Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Bugner. I will be right back. Since 1931, the attorneys at Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up, and welcome to this live edition of Couz's Corner, where we serve up top-shelf college football news and analysis on West Virginia, the Big 12, and conference realignment, because conference realignment does, in fact, affect our teams, or at least it could. Now, in this episode, we're going to talk about a couple things. One, I'm going to talk about the ACC stuff, how it impacts the Big 12. I'm also going to talk about some stuff surrounding West Virginia specifically and what some analysts over at CBS and 24/7 Sports are saying about Rich Rod coming back to Morgantown. And we're also going to touch a little bit on Neal Brown going to Texas, apparently. That is news that came out, I guess, kind of leaked yesterday, but has also been reported some today. Now, the ACC news, it's official. Let me go ahead and just read the statement, and I'll show it on the screen. The statement that the ACC put out today, it says, the ACC, Clemson University, and Florida State University announced today that they have resolved all ongoing legal disputes. With this resolution, Clemson and Florida State will remain full members of the ACC, and the parties will dismiss all pending lawsuits in the states of Florida, North Carolina, and South Carolina. As part of this settlement, the members of the ACC have agreed to build upon the previously announced success initiatives by creating an additional revenue distribution model that is based on viewership. The new and innovative model will continue to support the entire membership while adding a component directly focused on annual football and men's basketball viewership. As with success initiatives, ACC member schools will have the opportunity to earn increased viewership distributions from the ACC's media revenues and will be incentivized to take actions that enhance viewership across the ACC's 18 member schools. Today's resolution begins the next chapter of this storied league and further solidifies the ACC as a premier conference, said ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips. As we look ahead to our collective long-term future, I want to express my deepest appreciation to the ACC Board of Directors for its ongoing leadership, patience, and dedication throughout the process. The league has competed at the highest level for more than 70 years, and this new structure demonstrates the ACC's embracing innovation and further incentivizing our membership based on competition and viewership results. The settlements, coupled with the ACC's continued partnership with ESPN, allow us to focus on our collective future, including Clemson and Florida State, united in an 18-member conference demonstrating the best in intercollegiate athletics. This settlement, that's from Jim Phillips. Now, this is a quote from Jim Clements, the president of Clemson, former president at WVU. This settlement allows Clemson to remain nationally competitive at the highest levels and also makes our conference stronger. I appreciate the efforts of the ACC members and Commissioner Phillips in the creation of this innovative conference model. We remain proud members of the ACC, one of the strongest conferences in the country, and where our students, the other 17 ACC schools, and the league are committed to accomplishing greatness both on the field and in the classroom. Now let's go to a quote from Florida State's president, Richard McCullough. We're very pleased to have reached a settlement that benefits not only Florida State, but the Atlantic Coast Conference as a whole. From the start, we've held firm to the belief that the best solution would be one that enables FSU and every ACC institution to earn enhanced revenue through performance. I want to thank Commissioner Jim Phillips and my colleagues in the ACC Board of Directors for their leadership, and we look forward to continuing our membership in the ACC. So there you have it. This confirms the reporting that had come out the previous day that there would be an uneven revenue distribution model based on not only performance, but also based on TV viewership, which, let's face it, that's built in. There are a lot of things out of some of these schools' control that are going to influence that. Now, they can take all the efforts they want, but some teams just naturally have more fans than others, some based on past performances, some based on geography, some based on demographics. So they can spin this however they want to. I just don't see how this is a great deal for the schools in the middle tier of the ACC. I've talked about that ad nauseum. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. I'll leave a link at the end to the video I did yesterday on the topic. But for the schools like Louisville, Georgia Tech, and others, I just don't see this being a great move. And for those at the bottom, like Wake Forest, Boston College, and others, I think they just signed it because it secures their spot in the ACC and in the Power Four and keeps the conference together, at least for now. Now, what we also know is that we found out yesterday, the exit fee for the league is going to decrease. Now, today we actually got a number on that. It's been reported by several outlets, including War Chant, Greg Flugar's College Football Speak Around the Corner, and others. Amanda Kristovich I heard her today on 365 Sports. It appears it's going to be $165 million if you leave the conference today. You can leave the conference today, $165 million, and you take your media rights with you when you leave. And in the year after the year 2030, it becomes $75 million because it's going to decrease by $18 million each year up to that point, bottoming out at $75 million. So basically, at the end of the day, it appears to me that Florida State and Clemson got exactly what they were asking for in the lawsuits without actually having to go all the way to the finish line. They're going to get out of the league, or have the opportunity at least to get out of the league earlier if they have another conference to go to. The buyout has been reduced. They know actually what the number is, which is something they were asking for, because that was something that was kind of contentious as well. And they're getting these incentives where they have an opportunity to make more money with higher TV viewership, which again, they're going to automatically have built-in increases here. We're up, according to the articles that were out yesterday, up to $20 million extra they can make each year based on the on-field and on-court performance and in the viewership. That's a big deal. Now, the rest of the schools tend to lose up to $7 million a year each year potentially. I say lose, I mean make less than they're making now. So again, I just don't see how that's an attractive model for schools like Louisville, who potentially could find a home in the Big 12 if they needed to. Which I'll get to which leads me into the next part of this discussion. On the surface, this makes it sound like, okay, the ACC could potentially lose members, right? Earlier than even 2030. Because if there are a few schools in that conference like Florida State, Clemson, and others who probably could afford to write that check, that $165 million check, to leave early. Well, they have to have somewhere to go. And right now, Clemson and Florida State, it appears, don't have anywhere to go. The school that could really mess this whole thing up for the ACC would be North Carolina. It's been reported by multiple outlets that they are the most attractive school to both the SEC and the Big Ten. And if UNC can get their political house in order at their board of governors and get everybody on board for them to leave, they might just be willing to sign that $165 million check, or maybe wait 1 or 2 years and sign a $150 million check or whatever and leave to get into a Power 2 league to secure their future. Because right now it appears that ACC is not secure past 2030. You could go to the SEC or the Big Ten and you might make a little bit less money to start because you might have to take a partial share, but you would not be taking much of a pay cut from where you're at today, and you would be securing your future for the next, 10, 15 years potentially. So would they be willing to do that? And if they do that, it could start an unraveling in the ACC. Now, I don't think UNC is going to the Big 12. I don't think Florida State Clemson is going to the Big 12. But the Big 12 potentially would have a shot to land schools like Louisville, maybe Virginia Tech, maybe Pitt, maybe some others, right? That's been talked about ad nauseum. It's all speculation. It's something that us Big 12 fans have sort of been fantasizing about a little bit, especially those of like me who are fans of West Virginia would love to play some of our rivals again. But this makes it look like that could be now still a possibility even before 2030 if this exit fee being a little bit more reasonable, right? $165 million is still a ton of money, don't get me wrong. But if there's an unraveling, it could happen. And I'm still getting reports from my source that Louisville is still not happy with this deal. It did not take a unanimous vote to pass this. And we don't know who voted for what. Then maybe that'll come out later. But I'm still hearing that Louisville is not happy. They are not happy giving Florida State and Clemson more of their money when they too have been putting forth an effort to compete on the field. They're trying to spend money to compete. They care about football. They care about winning conference championships. They care about getting into the college football playoff. Football and sports in general matter at Louisville. They went out and hired a new basketball coach that's killing it right now. Louisville's back playing good basketball again. So they care at Louisville. They're doing a good job trying to remain relevant at the Power 4 level in major sports. So it's schools like that, to me, that are getting kicked in the gut here by this move. Because they're not going to chance to play Notre Dame as much, which I've mentioned in past shows. Their TV viewership is likely not going to be as high as Florida State and Clemson most years. So they're automatically going in some years. Now, they could get some of that incentive money that's out there for performance. But the other incentives, they might be taking a haircut in. And with UNC, the reason UNC might be enticed to leave, and I know I'm bouncing around here a little bit, but I'm just kind of speaking as I think, so bear with me. But UNC, UNC doesn't get the same TV ratings as a Florida State or a Clemson. As a matter of fact, the last report I saw, I'm not sure they even averaged 1 million viewers a week last year. So I don't think they're in that agreement, part of the agreement to play Notre Dame more frequently. I could see them being more incentivized to go ahead and leave early because they might not see a great opportunity to take advantage of these incentives or these viewership bonuses or whatever you want to call it. They might feel like they're better off going ahead and leaving and going to the Big Ten or the SEC now and going ahead and cutting that $165 million check, saying adios, I'm going over here. Now, it's at least 30 days, based on my understanding, before this can become official, before the paperwork's signed. But here in about a month or two, you can expect to hear more reports about maybe North Carolina talking to the Big Ten or the SEC potentially. That would not surprise me in the least. Now, it may not happen. They might decide to go ahead and stick around and try to ride this out, try to just win and make more money that way. And they might not be able to get their politics in order at the Board of Regents level so that they can leave and separate themselves from NC State. There's a lot of things that could or could not happen here. And I hate to speculate too much, but hey, it's kind of fun. But back to the Big 12 a minute. Let's just say UNC leaves, but Florida State and Clemson don't leave. Okay? Well, the league's going to stay together for the most part, the ACC. They might have to backfill to replace UNC, maybe Virginia, maybe UNC and NC State, however it plays out. They may only lose 2 teams. They still have 16 teams, counting Notre Dame. They could still stay intact. All they have to do is backfill. Would they try to backfill with Big 12 schools? Think about this for a minute. If you're a school like West Virginia or Cincinnati or UCF, or even go out, even if you're Utah, think about what if it's Utah? It could even be a Western school. If you're one of those schools who are right now making about $31 million in TV revenue, all in, I think you're making about $50 million in the Big 12 with everything all in. And you look over at the ACC and you see, okay, they're making about what we are baseline. Maybe a little more because of the ACC network. That reminds me, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button on this live stream, and I will get to your comments here momentarily. Not trying to abandon the chat room, but I've got to get through my monologue or I'll lose my train of thought. So I apologize. I will come back to the chats momentarily. But what if you're one of those schools that I mentioned, or any school in the Big 12, really, and you're looking that might have a shot at the ACC, but you're looking at the ACC, you're saying, okay, they're making where we are baseline now. And they have this incentive now to where we could go over here and get paid even more if we get enough viewership. And if you're somebody who feels like you can stack up viewership-wise with the ACC, or if you're a team that feels like you can compete in the ACC, maybe better than you can compete in the Big 12, and take advantage of some of that performance incentive money, maybe, just maybe, you give the ACC a call. Now, I don't see that happening, at least not in the near future. If that's something like that would happen, I could see it maybe happening in around 2029, 2030 when the Big 12 TV deal is almost up. Because right now, the exit fee would be too big for most of these schools to afford in the Big 12 to get out of a deal that's still 6 years old. It really would just now be kicking in 2025. So that's probably not logical. But once we get up closer to the expiration of the TV deal, I could see something like potentially happening. If this thing goes to ACC, if they see that it's working for these other schools, they might all of a sudden decide, you know what, we want to give that a try. We feel like we can go over there, and especially, that might especially hold true if Clemson and North Carolina and UNC all leave. If all those schools leave, because ESPN has already agreed to extend the ACC media deal through 2036, is my understanding. Now, unless there's a look-in clause or something, it's my understanding the ACC should be okay through 2036, even if they lose a few members, as long as they don't go below a certain number. Well, if they could backfill with a couple Big 12 schools and maybe a couple G5 schools, or even 4 Big 12, whatever, if you all of a sudden realize, say, hey, wait a minute, we could go over to the ACC, maybe be more competitive over there, maybe potentially make more money over there with the incentives they now have in place. Maybe that's where we need to look at. That's a possibility. Again, I think it's a long shot, especially with the Big 12 now looking at a deal with a private capital firm. I think it's a long shot. I don't see that happening. I think the Big 12 is going to be okay. But here's another area where I see the Big 12 could potentially be hurt. And that is if the Big 12, and I don't know, maybe hurt's the wrong word, but they would be impacted. Let's say the Big 12 was looking at getting Louisville or one of the other schools in the league. Well, if this ACC deal now gives a school like a Louisville, even though they may not be totally happy with what's going on, they might still look at this and go, wait a minute, we still have a better chance to make money in the ACC than we would if we go to the Big 12 because of these incentives. If Louisville is confident they're moving in the right direction athletically, and they feel like they can compete in the ACC, they might decide to stay put and not do anything. Because right now, you look at the Big 12, they're not making that much more money than the ACC and may not make more going forward, especially with these incentives. Now, you do have to look at the fact that the Big 12 has this private equity or this private capital deal looming. If this private capital deal that the Big 12 is looking at potentially doing is big enough, they could potentially use that money to entice a Louisville to come over, right? Something like that. But outside of that, I'm just not sure how the Big 12 is a more attractive league right now than the ACC. It's without the private capital money, I don't think the Big 12 has any chance of getting any of the ACC schools. I just don't. I don't think it makes any sense for those schools. Now, unless you're a Wake Forest or somebody who sees that they're probably going to lose money every year. But even then, I don't think the Big 12 would want those schools. The schools I think the Big 12 would want are the ones like Louisville, Virginia Tech, Pitt, or others who may not be able to make the full 15 to 20 million extra in the ACC and might be kind of staying pat, basically, where they are now, kind of staying the course, so to speak. Maybe that's not, to me, going to be enough to go to the Big 12 unless they have that private capital money to play with. I did the math on the private capital money, okay? we had heard rumors that the Big 12 was looking at a potential $1 billion private equity deal or private capital deal, right? You divide that out by 16 teams, it comes out to $62.5 million per team, right? Now, if you divide that over the course of the 6-year TV deal, it comes out to about about $10.5 million a year per school over the course of the TV deal, if you divide it out that way. But if that's, it depends on how they want to spend the money, right? Do they want to divide it out that long? Do they use it to entice schools to come into the league? I don't know. I haven't sat down and done the math to see what it would take to do that. And again, until we know the details around the private capital deal, again, this is all just speculation. But at the end of the day, this deal with the ACC, even though it may not keep everybody in the ACC totally happy, it may keep them at least intact for the next 5 years, because the Big 12 would be at best a lateral move, potentially. Without these, as long as the Big 12 don't have these extra incentives built in, why go? Why go there, right? Again, without private capital funding. And it also, without a conference to go to, Florida State and Clemson may not have a way out just yet. And two, they may not want to pay $165 million when they realize they can make another $20 million every year, at least in the case of Florida State and Clemson, in incentives and viewership money. Again, the schools to keep an eye on, to me, these are the two schools. If I'm an ACC fan, these are the two schools I'm keeping an eye on. I'm keeping an eye on the North Carolina Tar Heels. And of course, I guess you have to count NC State in that conversation a little bit too, because they may have to, friends over at College Football Monthly like to call it the Wolfpack backpack. They might have to take the Wolfpack backpack with them. That's almost a tongue twister, actually. It's hard to say. And I would also keep an eye on Louisville, because I keep hearing that Louisville's not happy. So I would, and it wouldn't surprise me if they get on the phone and at least make a phone call to Brett Yormark here in the next 30 days or so, once they get all the paperwork and everything signed. Dude, I would not be surprised if Louisville picks up the phone and calls Brett Yormark to at least have deeper conversations about what being in the Big 12 would actually look like. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying it's even likely to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if they have that phone call. And I wouldn't put it past Brett Yormark. I wouldn't put it past Brett Yormark to be able to come up with some sort of a deal or some sort of a creative way to maybe get a Louisville into the Big 12 or get someone into the Big 12. Now, you don't want to add just to add. You want to make sure they bring value. I think Louisville would do that for the Big 12. Again, you'd want to include your TV partners. What do your TV partners think about it? What would a potential private capital partner like Redbird, what would they feel about it? Now, you don't just have to make the TV networks happy. You have to make your private capital partner happy, right? If they decide to go down that road, which it appears they are, now you've got somebody else you got to keep happy. What would they think about adding a team like Louisville? And again, like I mentioned earlier, and then I'll leave off with this. I will leave this topic with this thought. Us Big 12 fans do not need to just assume the ACC is going to fall apart in 5 years. Because at the end of the day, are they really in that much better of a seat than the Big 12 is? Today, I would say it's about the same. I would say it's about the same today. Again, until we know the details of this private capital deal, once we get to know that, I'll be able to give you a better opinion. But in 5 years, what are things going to look like? Will the Big 12 be more attractive in 5 years than the ACC or vice versa? What are things going to look like? Let's just say, hypothetically, a team like Louisville comes out and they have a couple good seasons. Their TV viewership numbers are good. They win an ACC championship, and they end up they make the NCAA tournament. Say 4 out of 5 next years, and they take advantage of that money. And they're looking down going, wait a minute. We're doing pretty darn good here in the ACC. I don't think we need to go to the Big 12. And the Big 12 teams are sitting there going, wait a minute. I like what's going on over there in the ACC with Louisville and Georgia Tech. Those teams are making more money than us because they found a way to win and they're getting rewarded for winning. And wait a minute, we're getting just as good a TV viewership. Again, take any team in the Big 12 in this scenario. We like the way that TV viewership looks over there. And, we like the way our TV viewership looks compared to those other ACC schools. We think we can go compete in the ACC. We think we could bring better TV numbers. We think we could take advantage of that TV viewership bonus. We think we can win there to take advantage of the incentives. By gosh, I'm going to call Jim Phillips. So I do not want us Big 12 fans to get on our high horse and just assume that the Big 12 is going to come through this next 5 to 6 years smelling like a rose, because it's a long shot, but we got to be careful not to get too cocky, get too arrogant, and too high on our horses to assume that we couldn't lose teams or that we're going to be just fine. But anyway, I want to hear your thoughts. All right, I'm going to get to the comments, and then I'll talk a little bit about my new sponsor. Let me see. Curtis D's in the house. We've got David Doris Workman. We've got Daniel Gigax, who's a VIP member. Thank you, Daniel. We've got, Stanley Metz Jr. in the house. Curtis D 316. Let's see what Daniel Gigax has to say with this comment. He says, Pat 40 isn't happy for his Louisville team. I sent you the clip. Okay. I'll have to play that, Daniel. Thank you for that, brother. Steve Ohio, Florida chimes in. He says, don't let it be lost that Florida State, Clemson, Miami are only members who will be on Notre Dame's schedule. Automatic higher viewership. Bingo. That's why I said in my video yesterday, I just don't understand why all the schools agreed to just hand this free money over to those 3 schools. I understand some of them felt like they had to. Again, I don't think this required a majority vote. I would not be surprised if the news comes out who voted and who didn't. I would not be surprised to see that Louisville or maybe Pitt or Syracuse or some of those schools voted against this move. I would not be surprised. It also tells me something else, something I forgot to mention earlier. This tells me that the ACC probably did not feel confident going to the courts because they basically gave the schools what they were suing for to a degree. Did they not? Stephen Vitt says the ACC as we know it is done. They may still exist, but not the same way. Curtis D316 says the SMU is screwed. Not if they win. Not if they win, right? If they win, they can take advantage of some of that incentive money, but still it won't be near as much as the other schools. But I don't think they care. They obviously kind of knew what they were getting into. Clint Moses in the house. Two Mastas in the house. It says Notre Dame would be stubborn. They would keep that rickety ACC boat together. Curtis D says this is just a calm before the storm. The ACC is done as we know it. Daniel says, why join the ACC knowing that it's a sinking ship? I'm going to pull up that clip that you sent me, Daniel, because I think that's very relevant to this conversation here. All right, I'm going to play this clip. Hold on. Bear with me a second, guys. I'm pulling up this clip that Daniel sent me. I think it will be worthwhile to listen to this. All right, here we go.
Still have an ACC. Beyond that, though, yeah, bad signals and further inequity. And I think, honestly, you're going to have schools, I would imagine, that are, on the shorter end of this stick. They're going to be looking at their options and saying, you know what? I'm Louisville. I'm Pittsburgh. How's Big 12 doing? Do we need to possibly look at going someplace else where we're going to get a better revenue shake? I wouldn't say it's out of the question for schools that aren't just, steeped in loyalty to the ACC and maybe feel like they have been handed a bad deal here. So I don't say they're going to get up and leave now, but you watch in 5 years and see what the possible exit plans are. Still having a
All right. Very interesting words there from Dan Wessel. He kind of agrees with me that this doesn't mean things are all hunky-dory in the ACC. Thank you for sending me that clip, Daniel. I hope you guys could hear it. But yeah, I wouldn't join the ACC right now. But I'm thinking 5 years down the road. I still think the Big 12 at the end of the day is going to come out much more, maybe not making more money per se, but I do think they'll be more secure and more stable. Again, it's all going to hinge on what this private capital deal looks like that the Big 12 may be landing here very soon. And again, maybe Brett sees this going on in the ACC and he sees an opportunity and he calls his private capital partners and says, wait a minute, will you sweeten this deal if we get a Louisville, if we get Pitt, if we get NC State and Virginia Tech? How much more will you give us? If we go down to Atlanta and grab Georgia Tech, how much? Now, maybe there's some of that going on. I would not put it. Look, Brett Yormark paid Colorado a $2.5 million signing bonus to come to the Big 12. So I would not put it past him to do something to entice a school to come over. Now, I don't want to see conferences die. I don't think it's good for college football, for college athletics. But I also want at the end of the day, I want what's best for my team, the West Virginia Mountaineers. I'm a diehard West Virginia fan. This show is built around that. You all know that. That's the number one team I cover. It's the team I cheer for. It's the team I have plastered all over my house and my everywhere else. I bleed gold and blue. Louisville would be good to have in the Big 12 for my team. It would be good for Cincinnati. It would be good for UCF to have another team in the Eastern time zone. Now, does it help the Big 12 as a whole? I'm not sure. I would have to see the numbers. You may be diluting the payout. I don't know. But again, it's all depending on what your TV partners say and what your future private capital partners have to say. If they see it's valuable, then you should heavily consider it, in my opinion. All right. Right Cycle Works, very good comment here, says, for WVU, I think it's a tough choice between the stability of the Big 12 and having those regional rivals back in the ACC. And I'm sure that, there are many in West Virginia country who would like to have, heck, I'd like to have rivals back too. But at the end of the day, I have grown to love the Big 12, and I love the stability of the Big 12 right now. But I don't think West Virginia is going anywhere. I don't see that happening. And it wouldn't necessarily be in ACC might not even want West Virginia. Who knows? They would prefer to have somebody like Utah or Arizona, you know what I mean, for their academic prowess. But point being, the Big 12 as a whole, I just don't want us as fans to get I don't want us to get overconfident. You know what I'm saying? Until we know exactly what this private capital deal is going to look like. And if we start hearing more reports about, Louisville's and some of these other ACC teams being unhappy, like I said, I've had a source reach out to me and tell me that Louisville's unhappy. I'm, hoping to hear more from other sources as well, but that I'm planning to reach out to about maybe other schools as well. But I don't think it's all kumbaya in the ACC necessarily. But I also don't think right now, within the next year or two, you're going to see anybody move to the Big 12. Maybe in 2025. I'm sorry, 2030, 2029, 2030, but not right now because I don't think they want to pay that $165 million check. Now, you might be willing to pay $165 million if you're going to the SEC or the Big 10, but you're not cutting a $165 million check to go to the Big 12, I don't think. Jeff Morgan says, pass on the ACC. Don in Kansas in the house says, if anyone thinks ESPN will continue to pay the ACC the same money after Clemson FSU leave, that's a great, Don, that's a great point. I was thinking about that today while I was driving, listening to Greg's show. When the ACC extended this media deal with the ACC, did I say that right? Yeah. When ESPN extended this deal through 2036 with the ACC, it's with the current ACC. If their major programs start leaving, they have, surely to goodness, they gave themselves an out if teams leave the league. I would imagine ESPN executives are smart enough to do that. Or they don't care. Maybe they just see it as inventory. Another thing, what happens, Notre Dame wanted to play Clemson and Florida State and Miami more frequently, right? For their TV partner in NBC. If those schools, what happens if those three schools or two of them leave the conference? Then Notre Dame doesn't have that option anymore unless they do it, out of conference. Then does that make Notre Dame get antsy and want to look elsewhere? Like, I don't know, the Big Ten. So there are so many moving parts here that you could, I still don't think this means the ACC is totally safe. I still think this could be a Band-Aid on a bullet hole, or I don't even know if it's that extreme, but it could be a Band-Aid on a wound. It could be, holding it together with duct tape and zip ties for the next 3 to 4 or 5 years. But I don't think they're totally out of the woods yet. But I also don't think the Big 12 is totally out of the woods yet either long term, folks. I still am antsy, I guess because I'm a West Virginia fan and I've seen conferences fall apart too many times, and we've seen so much bad luck in Mountaineer Nation that I have a hard time being overly optimistic. But I'm just not 100% comfortable that West Virginia is still going to be, when all this dust settles in the next few years, whatever iteration we end up getting to, I'm still not 100% confident West Virginia is going to be safe and be included at that next phase. I'm not, and I probably won't be until it happens. Redbird Capital, take the wheel, says to Mazda. Great point, my man. Great point. We have Adam in the house. Sasquatch 304 is in the house. Hawkin in the house. Thank you all for jumping in. Stanley Metz Jr. says once FSU, Clemson, UNC, and Miami UVA split, the Big 12 becomes much more attractive. Then that's a good point. But at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to the money piece, right? And again, if those incentives are still in place in the ACC, it might be the opposite, Don. They might look. Stanley, they might look at it and go, "Wait a minute, the top brands are out. We have a better chance to win the league now and take advantage of that incentive money." But that would all depend on what ESPN's doing and if they're still giving them the same share they're giving them today. The alternative hypothesis in the house. Still getting some comments about the ACC poaching the Big 12 after FSU Clemson leave, similar to the bizarre talk from the Pac-12 breakup. Again, I don't think it's going to happen, but I do think it's possible. I just don't want us to get overly confident. You know what I mean? That's all I'm asking. Cranky Tiger says, I agree things will stay relatively calm to 2029, 2030. After that, all hell breaks loose. Yep. I think that's what we're going to see, honestly. Riley says you're 100% correct on that. Maybe 5 years from now that we should get into the ACC. I believe we should get it, and I agree on that. I could see the Big 12 going to 24 teams. Maybe the Big 12 decides to go with power and numbers, right? Let's be the biggest power league. That way they can't leave us out. If we accumulate enough teams, there's no way they can leave us out of the equation, right? That might be Brett Yormark's thinking. Who knows? All right, I want to give a quick shout-out to my newest channel sponsor, Appalachia Digital. You see their logo. Hopefully they're in the top. I guess it's your top. It's your top right of your screen. I have a new website coming up. It's already being built. It's almost finished. It will be going live in the next couple of days, hopefully. They are the ones who designed my website, and I want to give them a shout out for sponsoring the channel. They built the website and are dedicated to helping local and small businesses grow online. Whether you need a stunning website or want to make sure people can find you on Google, they've got you covered. So head over to appalachiadigital.com/Couz and let them know Couz sent you. If you need their services, again, they do SEO services. They can build websites. Check them out if you're in need for any of that. Again, Appalachia Digital, and they really, really love to help small businesses, and especially they'll help anybody, but they really, really if you have a company in the Appalachia region, they really, really want to help you out. But again, they'll help anybody. So you don't have to be in the Appalachians, but that's where they're based. So and obviously that's the name. But anyway, I want to give them a shout out for sponsoring the show. And let's go ahead and jump over to the next topic. I didn't see your comment, Outlaw, to be honest with you, brother. I got 170 people in here. Can't see them all. Let me find it. There it is. He says, the only way the Big 12 and ACC stay relevant in 10 years is if they merge. Put the farce academic crap aside. I've been on record to saying I would love to see an ACC Big 12 merger. I would love it. It would make me so happy as a West Virginia fan. Outlaw, thank you for the comment, brother. By the way, go check out his channel if you haven't. But yeah, and thanks for chiming in. Thanks for doing the chat, brother. I appreciate you. And thanks for reminding me about your comment, because I did indeed miss it. I overlooked it. My bad. But a merger would be awesome, or even a TV agreement, like the scheduling agreement, like the SEC and Big Ten are looking at doing. Anything that they can do to help strengthen themselves, I think they ought to do it. Let's go ahead and jump over to the West Virginia part of the show. If you're not a West Virginia fan, I'd love for you to hang around. And again, if you drop me a super chat, y'all, I'll you can take this conversation anywhere you want to go. Go to where it says post a comment, hit the $sign next to the chat box, and it'll highlight the comment you make, and it makes a small donation to the channel, and it's an easy way to support what I'm doing here. But let's go ahead and jump over to the next topic, which is the West Virginia topic, and that is, sorry, I'm trying to find my banner here. Still trying to get used to this new platform I'm using. CBS Sports had some really nice things to say about Rich Rodriguez coming back to West Virginia. I don't have video clips to play, but I do have some quotes here and just kind of talk about. Number one, this also includes 24/7 Sports. CBS Sports owns 24/7 Sports, so they're also included in this. But when you look at this, first I start with Brandon Marcello. Brandon Marcello on the CBS Sports YouTube channel, they were asking him his opinion and how he would grade Rich Rod coming back to West Virginia. He said he gave it an A-, and the reasons he gave, he feels like that Rich Rod has proven himself at multiple levels, at both the FCS level, the FBS level, and the P4 level, because he's coached at West Virginia before. He's coached at Arizona, where he had some success. He feels like he checked all those boxes. He also feels like, the fan base and the program is recharged having Rich Rod back home because of the nostalgia, because of the success he had there in the past, and because he's a good football coach. Rich Rodriguez is a good football coach. He is one of the inventors of the zone read offense. He is an absolute offensive guru. College football, all of football today is different because of Rich Rodriguez, right? He's recharged the program, and as a fan, I can tell you, it's true. We are so stoked and excited for this upcoming football season. I would not be surprised if we see record season ticket sales this year in Morgantown. The quote that I wrote down that I thought I liked the best is he says Rich Rod is the, quote, perfect fit for West Virginia football. I think he proved that the first time he was in Morgantown. I think he'll prove it again. I do think he's the right fit for the job. The one question that I guess the reason he didn't give him an A or an A+, but he gave him an A- is because he did question, can he do this at the Power 4 level in the NIL era? In the transfer portal era. He did have to deal with NIL in the transfer portal a little bit at Jacksonville State, but not on the same level, especially the NIL piece. Jacksonville State, they didn't have as much NIL money to give out, so it wasn't as big of an issue there. At West Virginia, it's a different story. Guys are going to want that bag. And how does he manage it? Did he bring on the right staff to manage it? That's all going to, if he didn't, we'll all find out soon enough, because they won't have success. But I think he will have success. I'm very confident he will. At least I think I think year one will be a learning curve, and I think year two is really when they'll take off and start having really good years. But it's a fair question to ask by Brandon Marcello. Can he do it at the Power 4 level in this era of college football? We will find out soon enough. The second one I want to talk about is someone by the name of Smoke Dixon. Smoke Dixon is an analyst over at 24/7 Sports, again, which is owned by CBS. He actually said he gives it an A+. Or I'm sorry. he didn't grade it. They just asked him his opinion. He says he thinks Rich Rod is building his culture at West Virginia, that he's bringing that back. He's bringing that energy and that culture back to West Virginia football that he had there in the mid-2000s. And he said he was, quote, an energy and cultural fit, end quote. So, again, he uses the word fit. He thinks Rich Rod is a fit. And, guys, I think fit matters at West Virginia maybe more than a lot of other schools, if not most other schools. It's so different there. The recruiting is different. The culture is different. The geography's different. Everything's different at West Virginia. The demographics are different. Everything's different. And not just any coach can win there. And I think Rich Rod is one who can, because he embodies the Mountaineer mentality, the blue-collar mentality, the West Virginia culture, the coal mine culture, what I like to call it. I do think he's a fit, and there's 2 national analysts who have said they think Rich Rod's a good fit at West Virginia. Smoke Dixon went on to say, when they asked him about how long do you think it will take Rich Rod to get West Virginia into the college football playoff, he said 2 years. 2 years. He thinks Rich Rod will have West Virginia in the college football playoff in 2 years. That's pretty awesome to think about. Here's what he said, and I'll get to the super chat in just a second. He says, I'll give Rich 2 years. He's going to find his right guy. And again, in the Big 12 might get 2 teams in, talking about the automatic qualifiers that are being proposed. And when you get Rich Rod and that explosive offense that can score a bunch of points, you just need to do enough on defense. And they are doing well in recruiting. So Smoke Dixon thinks West Virginia can be in the college football playoff in 2 years under Rich Rodriguez, and he actually predicted that they will win 8 games in 2025, which is pretty darn good for year one, having to do an entire roster turnover. Thank you for the super chat, Outlaw College Football. He says, Rich Rod has that moxie. Alabama and Michigan wanted to hire him for a reason. Lloyd Carr undermined him at Michigan. Great point, Outlaw. Michigan, I had a Michigan fan today chime in on one of my videos. Very respectful. Said he didn't feel like Michigan gave Rich Rod a fair shake. They didn't give him enough time. And Rich Rod, there were a lot of donors and boosters and people at Michigan that never wanted Rich Rod in the first place because he wasn't a, quote, Michigan man. They weren't pulling the rope in the same direction. He's even made comments that, the AD that hired him got fired while he was there. He feels like if that AD hadn't got fired, they would have kept him on and he would have had success that 4th year when Brady Hoke took him to a Sugar Bowl. It was with mostly Rich Rod recruits. So Rich Rod feels like he could have had the same success with that team and maybe kept that thing rolling after that had they not fired the AD, and he could have been able to stay on. So great comment, Outlaw. I appreciate it and totally agree with you. And he had some success at Arizona. Arizona was not a great program. Heck, they're still not a great program. What have they had? 3 10-win seasons in their history, and I think he had one of them. So it's not like he walked into a Taj Mahal of college football programs. No offense to Arizona, but I'm just basing it on history here. He did pretty darn good at Arizona. And Alabama wanted him the year before he went to Michigan, and he turned it down. So Outlaw's exactly right. And Outlaw's an Alabama fan, so he can speak to that. He knows that. And again, thank you for the super chat. If you want to support the show, if you want to make sure your comment gets read, you can highlight it by dropping a super chat. WVU Earl's in the house, who's a channel VIP member here. He says, you are so right, Outlaw. Make sure I'm not missing. Bob Swanger, thanks for joining the show. Nathan Living Good, BC, Tuffy Duffy 27. Thank you all for joining the show. All right, let's go ahead and continue on. The next analyst I want to talk about is actually a writer, not really an analyst, but it's Dennis Dodd, who writes over at CBS Sports. Dennis had the following quote. He actually gave it an A+ hire. He said it was an A+ hire in an article he did a few weeks back. He says, this is his quote now. And I'll share the link to this article and all these clips in my description box. But he says, you can go home again. One of the grandfathers of the zone read spread returns to his alma mater and a place he coached from 2001 to 2007. Rodriguez will bring a sense of nostalgia and possibility to a program that is dying for a sniff of the old days. Rodriguez, who's 61, is literally the embodiment of those old days. So Dennis Dodd, Smoke Dixon, and Brandon Marcello all think this is a good hire. I've heard Josh Pate over on his show, who also is part of the CBS Sports and 24/7 family. I've heard him talk about how good of a move this was for West Virginia to bring Rich Rod home. So apparently everybody over at CBS and 24/7 thinks this was a home run move by Ren Baker and the Mountaineers about their program to bring Rich Rod home. And I agree. I've been on board saying that all along. I was not an advocate for it at first, but once I saw the list of talent, the talent of the I'm sorry, guys, I'm getting tongue-tied today. It's been a long day. I drove over 300 miles today, so bear with me. Once I saw the list of candidates for the job and I looked at the resumes, I was like, Rich Rod's better candidate than that guy and that guy and that guy, about even with that guy, better than that guy and that guy and that guy. And I'm like, okay. Once you check everybody else off the list, who's left? And it's Rich Rod. The dude has won at the Power 4 level. He's won at the FBS level. He's an offensive guru. He's done it at West Virginia before. He's going to know the culture. He has the backing of the donors, which to me is what pushed it over the edge. He brings an excitement level back to West Virginia football that they need from a national perception, right? We've talked about brand. We've talked about TV viewership and all of that in these conversations about realignment. He helps bring that to West Virginia now. And that probably had to play a hand in the decision. It probably was part of Ren Baker's thinking and thought process. I'm sure it wasn't at the top of the list, but I guarantee you it's part of the equation and part of the discussion. Outlaw College Football says, with another thank you for the super chat, brother. He says, here's a 5 spot for the awesome thumbnail I just stole from your previous podcast from yesterday. Woo-ha! Thank you, brother. I didn't know you stole my thumbnail, but that's okay. Thank you for the $5 super chat, man. Much appreciated. Jacob Rutherford says, oh, Rich Rod sounds a little concerned. He did today, didn't he, Jacob? I ain't going to lie. But again, it's only the 4th spring practice, so I don't want to get too overly excited, and we got to remember to keep our expectations realistic. It's year 1, new staff, almost an entirely new roster for the most part. Very little experience coming back. A lot of unproven guys at the FBS or at the P4 level that are going to have to play a lot of snaps. So I don't want to get overly. I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess would be the right way to put it. I'm cautiously optimistic, looking at about a 6-7 win season this year, probably. But after that, I do think the rocket ship takes off in year 2, and the future looks bright in Morgantown. Last bit of news I want to touch on, not a whole lot to talk about, but Neal Brown, it was announced today, and I do not have the announcement pulled up, but it was announced today that he apparently has joined the Texas coaching staff. His role has not been named yet, but he has apparently joined Chad Scott in Austin to be on the Longhorn staff. Now, what his role is going to be, who knows? That's yet to be determined. But he apparently is going to be on the staff. So, hats off to Neal Brown. Neal Brown is a by all intents and purposes, seems to be a very good human being. He did things the right way at West Virginia. He built a good culture at West Virginia. What they did in the classroom mattered. What they did off the field mattered. He wanted to mold good young men. He did everything right, but he just did not win enough football games for whatever reason. I'm happy for him to find another opportunity. And also, this actually benefits West Virginia too, because any money Neal Brown makes at his next job gets deducted from what West Virginia has to pay him on his buyout. So this will save West Virginia money. Again, we don't know what his role is going to be. He may not be, if he's just going to be an analyst, he's probably not going to make a ton of money. But anything he makes comes off of what West Virginia owes him. If he's making a couple $100,000 a year, then that's a couple $100,000 a year West Virginia don't have to pay him. So we'll take it. And, I do wish Neal the best. I have no ill feelings towards him or his family. And I do think Neal Brown is a good football coach. For whatever reason, I don't think he was a good coach at West Virginia. If he can find the right fit, the right place for him, I do think he can have success. Outlaw of College Football with another super chat. Thank you, brother. He says, if Rich had went to Bama, would he have succeeded? Oh, that's a great question. I don't think I think it would have been a similar situation as Michigan Outlaw. I think he would have had a rough year or two. And, I know how Alabama fans are and how they can be. I know they're very impatient. Would they might have run him out of town, 2 years in, 3 years in, just like Michigan did. I don't know. I think it would have been a very similar situation because Rich Rod, at that point in time, there wasn't a lot of teams running what he was running offensively. And he would have had to come in. Probably the players on the roster probably wouldn't have really been, the type of guys that could have run his system. So it may not have worked year one. Year two, he could have started getting more of his guys. And of course, back then they didn't have the transfer portal. So it would have taken him 3 to 4 years to get enough of his types of guys in there. So I think it would have been a similar situation as Michigan, but I could be wrong. I do think he could have succeeded long term, yes, but it might have taken him 3 to 4 years to get there, and I'm not sure Alabama would have given him enough time. So hopefully I answered your question. I want to thank everybody for jumping on here. Thanks again to my new sponsor, Appalachia Digital. Be on the lookout for my new website coming very soon at wvsportschat.com. Also want to give another shout out to Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, your personal injury or medical malpractice attorneys in West Virginia and Virginia. If you can't support me financially, that's all good. It's okay. You can support me for free by hitting the thumbs up button. Hit the X out of the chat box, go over and find the thumbs up button, press it, and then come right back into the show. Or if you're watching this on the replay, you can press it right now. It's very quick, very easy, and it doesn't cost you a penny. Hit the thumbs up button. Also, subscribe to the channel, please. And don't forget about my basketball channel, Hoops from the Hills. I'm hoping to do a live post-game show after tonight's game against Utah. Even though it's going to be late, I'm going to try to do it anyway. So please come over and support that channel. If you're a Mountaineer basketball fan, I would love to have you over there, and I need to get my sub count up and my view count up as well. I want to thank you for tuning into the show. Thanks to all of you who commented. Thanks to all of you who watched and listened. I do want to get this quick comment back from Daniel Gigax, who's a very loyal VIP member. He says, in an alternate universe, Rich Rod takes the Bama job. Saban is fired from the Dolphins and takes the job at West Virginia. Daniel, that would have been an awesome scenario, brother. And maybe West Virginia would have national championships now instead of Alabama, right? Love that comment, man. Curtis D, West Virginia does need to win tonight, brother. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You got Matt Taylor in the house. He says, great channel, man. I'm from your neck of the woods. My wife's cousin is your channel sponsor. Awesome. That's awesome, man. Good to hear that. It's always cool to hear from local people on here. Thanks for the support. Yeah, Saban left. That's right. Saban wasn't fired from the Dolphins, was he? He left on his own. But it might have been maybe he saw the writing on the wall. Either way, the point still remains. Maybe Nick Saban would have come back to West Virginia instead of Alabama. I don't know. But I don't, who knows? It's great to think about those what if scenarios. I always think, what if West Virginia had beat Pitt in 2007, won a national championship? They would have went on a rocket ship ride, man. And, Rich Rod likely wouldn't have left. Heck, they might have won another national championship or two under Rich Rod. Who knows? His recruiting was on the upswing. West Virginia was a nationally relevant program. They were on national TV about every week. They were exciting to watch, man. And it'll be so awesome if we can get that magic back in Morgantown again this year, or at least in the next couple of years. Hopefully, can he rekindle that rich
I'm aware. All right. Sorry about that, folks. I had a power outage, but I was done anyway. Thank you all for tuning into the show. Thank you for your support. Have a great day and Q Country Roads.